Okay, you can see my screen?
Yep.
Sure.
Good, okay. So this is, so Bruce and Tony and I have been doing this now for a couple of years. They are clients of mine. I am the regional sales manager for this river cruise company, one of the top rated river cruise companies in North America, AMA Waterways. I cover New England. Tonight, I come to you from my office in my home in Massachusetts. I think some of you, if not all of you, are in Massachusetts or New England. And this is what I do. I help my customers explain the product. We talk about destination. We talk about the ships. We talk about cuisine, wines, things like that, excursions. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through a little bit about what a river cruise is, and then we'll dive into the 3 different itineraries and dates that the guys have chosen for next year's groups. And they're all really nice itineraries, and it's very exciting content. So let's get going. AMA Waterways is a family-owned company. We're not the biggest river cruise company in North America. We're probably 3rd or 4th largest in North America, but we're very well known in the industry. These are our owners. It's a family-owned company. Left to right, Gary Murphy, who used to own a large Irish tour operator. He and his father joined forces with Christine Karst in the middle there, and Rudy Schreiner on the right with the glasses. And they have a river cruise background, and the Murphys had a lot of money. They got together in the early 2000s. But the essential part of the story is that the gentleman with the glasses, Rudy Schreiner, he started the river cruise product at a company called Uniworld Luxury River Cruises back in the 1980s. He's a nautical engineer by trade. He designed all of their fleet. He designs all their itineraries. And in the middle 90s, when the company Viking River Cruises started, when they opened their doors, they recruited Rudy away from Uniworld to be their first president. So he designed Viking's fleet, all of their itineraries for about 9 or 10 years. And then in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004, he came over and started his own river cruise company, designed these ships, designed these itineraries, and we've had great success ever since. Slowly but surely, we've grown each year and built new product, built new ships, and just a great company. I've been working with them for many years now. River cruising, if you've not been on a river cruise, the benefits of river cruising are that the ship is like your floating hotel. A river cruise is not meant to compete with an ocean cruise. It's more about, it's a better way to see these old port cities in Europe than, say, a motor coach tour or a rail tour or driving yourself in Europe on the wrong side of the street. So everything is on the ship. You have a beautiful ship. You have a beautiful stateroom, 2 lovely restaurants. All your meals are included. All your beer and wine is included with your meals, soft drinks. We have a happy hour on the ship that's included, and all of your excursions are included in the pricing of these packages. So that's a big difference from ocean cruising, right? There's no seasickness. You're on a river. You don't have to dress up for dinner. It's pretty casual. And the ships dock right in the cities and in the towns. So when you get off the ship for your excursion, you're right there. You either meet your local guide or you go off on your own. We carry bicycles on the ship if you want to do a bike tour. We do hikes. We do walking tours. There's never less than 5 different options to choose from every day that you have a port of call. So it's a really laid back, very interesting, culturally interesting. The food, the cuisine is wonderful. Just a great experience. And this is why it's so popular now in North America. Just a quick look. This is not our entire fleet, but just to give you a feel, if you've not been on a river ship or seen a river ship, it's a very different looking vehicle to sail on. It's built long and narrow to fit through the lock system of the waterways and rivers. We're mostly in Europe. But if you look at the ships now, they're very similar in build. They're built to the river that they're going to sail on. They're built to fit through the specific locks of the river that they sail on. They can park on a dime. They have the engines now make very little noise. They're very green efficient now. So this is what a river ship looks like. And typically for our company, we take about 156 passengers on a ship this size. These ships are 38 feet wide and 443 feet long. Okay. And that's what differentiates the companies. Many of our competitors on the same exact size ship would put 200 passengers. 156 for us makes for larger staterooms, larger public areas. Typical stateroom on one of these ships that I'm referring to here is what we call our twin balcony stateroom. And the second and third decks, there's only 3 levels on a river cruise. So on the second and third decks, the staterooms all look like this. So you have to the left of this particular image here is an outside balcony. You see the chairs are outside. You can sit outside in the morning, have your coffee. You can sit outside in the evening, drink a glass of wine. And to the right, you see a French balcony. The door slides, but you can't go out. You see the 2 chairs are in the actual stateroom. And then all the staterooms come with twin bedding, or if you're not a couple, not twin bedding, queen bedding, and if you're not a couple, twin bedding. Okay, so that's how it is. And the stateroom you're looking at here is about 215 to 225 square feet, and just very comfortable for a river ship. Dining is one of the reasons that people would opt for a river cruise as opposed to a motor coach tour. Motor coach tours, you tend to take your meals at hotels. When you're out touring, you stop somewhere on the roadside and get soup and a sandwich or something like that. This is all sourced locally. We don't freeze anything on the ship. Every single day, new supplies of food stuff would come on the ship. Everything's sourced locally. Everything's fresh. We make our own breads. We make our own pastries. We make our own ice cream. And then you have a European menu that changes daily, reflecting where are we on the river, what country are we in, what's the specialty. If you're in Budapest, maybe lunch is Hungarian goulash, right? So it's really interesting. Bruce is chiming in there. It's really interesting fare. But we don't forget that sometimes people miss their menu from home, or they need some creature comforts from home. So the right side of the menu would be a North American menu that's static. You can always get a New York strip steak. You can always get a baked potato. You can always get a cheeseburger at lunch with a basket of fries if you like, if that's what you want to do. And some people go back and forth and do that. So it's it caters to a wide range. But obviously you're in Europe. Our idea is that, try these different things that are local cuisine, and it's just really interesting cuisine. And then we are all about the local wines and beers. With your meals, with lunch and dinner, we serve wine and beer, and each day it's a different fine white wine and a different fine red wine on the ship. But you can always go back to the day before, a few days before. If you don't like the Riesling on Wednesday, you can go back and ask your wait server for the Chardonnay that was served on a Monday, let's say. So, and then every night also for those that are looking for cocktails or spirits, we have something called the Sip and Sail in the guest lounge, where everybody gathers every night for about an hour before dinner. You listen to the cruise manager, maybe give some updates on the agenda for the next day, what the entertainment's going to be that night, and we open the bar, just open bar, whatever. We've got about 28 signature cocktails. We have spirits, and again, we have the beer and wine. So a good way to kind of get loose before dinner, meet other folks on the ship, and again, the wines from these regions. I mean, most river valley regions are very fertile, and they're known for their wines. Not just in France, but in Germany and Austria and Hungary, even places like Romania, the Douro River in Portugal, great wines. So this is kind of what we try to feature, is the cuisine and the wines of the region. And I won't forget the beers. I mean, you're going through places like Germany and Austria and the Netherlands, Belgium, great beers, just great beers. For me, usually I'm drinking a local beer with lunch, and then I'll switch over to wine with dinner. So trying to get the best of all worlds. And then excursions. So this is really why you come on something like a river cruise, because the excursions are very, very thoughtfully crafted, small group experiences. a lot of wine tastings. Even though we feed you well on the ship, usually the end of each excursion, you're doing a wine tasting or a beer tasting or a cheese tasting or whatever that town is known for, whatever that specialty is, you're tasting some of that. We bring you to cooking classes, we bring you to pastry shops, and we're doing always authentic experiences with the small business owner, the vintner that's been in that it's been in their family for generations, pastry shops that have been in the same family for generations, things like that. So you meet the locals, you meet the vendors, you meet their families, and you're traveling in groups, usually of 15 to 20 at the most. The groups max out at 20, and then we just break it into another group. So you're walking around the towns, you're walking around the cities, or perhaps biking around the towns. We carry 26 touring bicycles, we have guided bike tours, and we have hikes as well. So if you want to get out there and hike, that center image there, you can see always on the river, the high point of the river, you'll find a cathedral or a fortress or a monastery, something that was meant to look down and check invaders, if people coming to maraud your town back in the medieval town. So usually the hike is up to the high point of the town of the city and then back down through the main drag in the city, and you get to see everything that way too. So just a different perspective of what you're visiting. And now here's the first itinerary that we're going to look at that the gentlemen chose. This is for spring of next year, April 15, 2023. It is an itinerary called the Romantic Danube. I've done it several times myself. I've done it with colleagues. I've done it with my wife. Great itinerary, probably our most popular itinerary on the Danube. And then please excuse the very basic, not to scale map, but just so you understand what part of Europe you're in. You can do, our cruises are 7-night cruises, and you can do pre or post stays with us where you're still with the cruise manager, and we still have excursions and tours to offer you when we put you up in a hotel. In this case, the 3-night pre-stay is in Prague in the Czech Republic, a great city, a wonderful city in Europe. It's optional, you don't have to do it. You can just buy it as a 7-night cruise. But what you have here is, the neat thing about this itinerary is you have 5 really interesting countries on a 7-night cruise, right? So you've got Germany, Austria, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, okay? So, and it's a combination of big cities, some big cities, Vienna and Budapest and Prague, and then really small medieval towns where there's almost no vehicular traffic. Maybe the population is 800 people. So you have a real sort of cultural mix here as you're going through these 5 different countries. Now, Bruce, did you do the pre or you did the cruise? What did you do on your itinerary?
We actually did it. We did the backwards. We did the melodies of Danube.
Okay.
So we started in Budapest. We flew in a day early. We just did 1 night in Budapest on our own.
Okay.
And then in Prague, we couldn't stay the whole 3 nights. And I had some points, to be honest. So I stayed at a hotel in Prague, and the cruise manager said, "Hey, if you can get to our hotel by this time,
Gave you the chance.
we'd love for you to come on the tour with us." So that's what we did.
Oh, cool. That's very nice. Okay, good. Yeah, Prague is a beautiful old city. I would say for people, I mean, I've been going back and forth to Europe for about 35 years now, and Prague is one of the top 3 or 5 cities that if someone said, "Where do you want to go?" It's one of the places I would pick first. Right?
I love this picture because when we were there, you could not see any of the street. It was packed.
Mm.
The clock tower goes off every hour,
Right.
and people start getting there at like 1/4 of the hour, and it just gets very crowded.
Right. It is.
It's a great city.
It's a happening city. There's a lot of young people like to party there. A lot of other people like to go there for the culture and the history and the architecture. It's just a wonderful city. And if you have the opportunity,
crazy street donuts that are
Yes.
those donuts were incredible.
Yes. And somewhere around the corner here, there's supposedly, listen, everybody has a claim, but supposedly is the oldest sausage restaurant in all of Europe. So there's every city has a story, but yeah, there's great places to eat, great places to drink. I love the architecture. it's just a really cool city. It's one of my top cities in Europe. So again, if you have the chance and you want to, if you have 10 days for a vacation and you want to add the Czech Republic, it's a great ad. Okay. And then we then coach you down. You did it in reverse order. So you would have ended in Vilshofen. Yes.
Yes,
Right.
with the Oktoberfest.
Right, with the Oktoberfest. So we actually have, we've bought some space, some waterfront space about 6, 7 years ago. And we've got a beer tent there, a permanent beer tent. And it's kind of neat, the big pretzels and beer, and you have the beer queen comes down and they come down and play some oompa music for you.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're starting in this end, and I've done it both ways, the way you did it in this direction. But if you're starting in this direction, maybe you got into the airport 4 hours before, maybe you just got down from Prague. You're meeting other people that you're going to be sailing with for the next 7 days, and you're drinking beer or champagne. There's champagne there too. And it's lively and the music is fun and it's just very light, and it's a really cool way to start a river cruise, right? To start a week-long river cruise. So I do like Vilshofen, an easy town to walk through. You probably see the whole town in 45 minutes, right? So
About, yeah.
Oh, there you go. There's the year-round Oktoberfest that we've got in Vilshofen. So, and that's the beer queen. Usually some lovely young lady gets to wear that sash for a year at a time. I don't know how they vote on that, but that's usually what happens. And it's a lot. It is a lot of fun. Then we go down to Passau in Germany. This is the meeting of three rivers. Two smaller rivers come into the Danube River, and this is a beautiful. I never know what to say, large town or small city. I think the population here is a couple 100,000. This is a great walking town. This is great. You can bike along the river there. Lots of different excursion on the day that we're here. And it's a beautiful bend in the river as well. Just very scenic. And you can see even just from the image, the architecture is sort of what we think of when we think of Germany and fairy tales and medieval times. So just a really interesting day here. And then this is the day where this day is chock full of great experiences. And this is the day where you actually have to make a decision, because you can either do a day up in the foothills, the mountains of where Sound of Music was filmed in Salzburg, or you can go the other side of the river. You can go to Český Krumlov, which is in the Czech Republic. And this is where we dock in Linz, also a very nice town. When I was here with my wife, we went up to Salzburg because my wife is a huge fan of Julie Andrews and Sound of Music. We spent the day up there. But when we came back, actually this lady here with the yellow scarf around her neck, her name is Maria, and she's from Linz. And she said, before dinner, we have an hour. Do you want me to give you a walking tour of Linz? And we said, absolutely. So she took us to a couple of pubs, and we had a blast, and we got to see, you know, we spent the day in Salzburg and came back and then saw Linz, and then got on the ship and had a lovely dinner. So just a really a full day, either way you choose it. This is Salzburg. You're up. It's about a 2-hour drive up into the mountains. It is beautiful. It does remind you of the movie Sound of Music, for those of us old enough to remember that movie. Most people in Austria, the funny thing is, have never heard of the movie. The movie was a big hit in the United States. No one in Austria knows what it is. They just know that American tourists go there to see where it was filmed. So kind of interesting, but it is a beautiful area. It's a beautiful part of Austria, and Salzburg is a really nice small city. And you could do window shopping here. They give you a great tour of the town. And I think I stopped in a pub. My wife was doing some shopping for our grandkids, and I was in a pub eating, you know, bratwurst and drinking beer. So really cool visit here. And this is the other one you can be doing. So again, this is what I like about some of the days on our itineraries, is that when people get back on the ship, not everybody, we don't have a standard tour that all 150 people do, right? We break people into smaller groups and they do all different things. When you come back on the ship for dinner, for the sip and sail and then dinner, everybody's showing photos from their phone and comparing notes and telling stories, and it's great. It makes for great conversation. This is a great visit. Chesky Krumlov they used to call it I can't think of the nickname for it right now, but it'll come to me in a few slides. So, oh, Little Venice. They used to call it Little Venice because it's a very wealthy. Back in medieval times, it was a very wealthy city, and people came here to buy trade goods and to buy clothing and so on and so forth, and buy gifts. And it still looks like that. It's a really interesting city. So if you don't want to do Salzburg, you have something against Christopher Plummer, or you didn't like the movie, you can certainly do Chesky Krumlov. Okay. And then here's a day, another day where there's in Wiesenkirchen, where there's a lot of things to do on this day. Again, some days with the smaller towns, you might have 2 or 3 excursions in the same day. We might move upriver, 5 kilometers, and you get to do different things. So this is a great day, I thought, as well. We're in Dürnstein, cruising through the Wachau Valley to get here, and then you're in Dürnstein, a small medieval town in Austria. Very little vehicular traffic. When we get off the ship, we have permission to walk through somebody's vineyard to get into the town. It's a really interesting small town. Up on the hill, back up on the hill there, you can see, I think that's the Abbey that we visit later in the afternoon. Dürnstein is known for apricots. They're the apricot capital of Central Europe, whatever that carries. But I do remember we picked up some apricot wine and some jam and things like that. It was kind of interesting, so we did some tastings there. Yeah, here's Melk Abbey. This is run by Benedictine monks. It's from the 16th century. And when you go,
It's so impressive.
It is. There's so much wealth. These monks knew what they were doing. There's so much art and history, and there's a library in there, and you could spend days in there. The excursion is about two hours, maybe 2.5 hours most. But it's beautiful. I would say outside of the Vatican, I've never seen so much art and artifacts in one place. It's one of the top visits on this itinerary. And then we have a wine tasting, exclusive visit to Grin Castle, where we do a wine tasting, usually late afternoon. Sometimes we do it in the evening, depending on the time of year. This is also very interesting. And when we're in the castle, we would be the only guests in the castle. So this is interesting as well. I'm into wine tastings, if you can't tell. And then the next day, we're in Vienna, Austria. Now, this is the capital city of Austria. It's a big city. We spend the entire day here. We bring people in after breakfast. We coach you into the city center. It's about 8 blocks from where the ship docks to get into the city. We have guided tours there. But after the guided tours, we then run shuttles going back and forth to the ship about every hour on the hour. We have a meeting place, usually one of the cathedrals. And I would say take advantage of this. It's a beautiful city. You have Bruce, you have Tony. You tell them what are you interested in? Is it classical music? There's so much opportunity to see, where Mozart played music, where Strauss played music. Strauss is from here. There are my wife and I went to a Mozart and Strauss concert one evening in one of the concert halls. This was optional. We did this on our own. The ship did take us there, and it was a wonderful experience. But my point is simply that there's so many restaurants and pastry shops. On this particular day, some people didn't dine with us for dinner. They found places for restaurants, or they had references from people at home. You got to go to this restaurant, references to go to museums, this and that. So we do encourage you to stay in Vienna for the entirety of the day if you want. Some people got off the ship after. We don't get offended if you skip the entertainment we have on board. You can go back into the town. You can go back into the cities and have fun. Right? That's what this is about. And then I talked about Strauss. That's a statue in the center of the city. That's that's dedicated to Strauss. That's the Capitol building there. There's so much there. There's so many things there. We could talk for an hour just on Vienna. It's a wonderful city, but that's why you use a travel advisor. If you have a particular interest, let Bruce know, let Tony know, let the other agents that work for Longwood know that, and they can do a little research for you and say, okay, this is open these hours. This is how you get there. This is what time of year this is open, or this is how they run the tours, things like that. So really encourage you to do a little homework on your own for these itineraries, because while everything is included in the pricing and it's escorted by us, there's plenty of free time built in for you to do your own exploring. This is the next country and city along the way. This is Bratislava, Slovakia, one of the ex-Soviet era countries. They've had their own government now since 1992. This is the Bratislava Castle. On this day, this is my choice here, is to do the hike up to the castle, and you get a great vantage point to look at the rest of the city. The old part of the city is where we're visiting. It's a very large city, but we sort of visit just the older section, the old quarter of the city. And at the top of that section is this beautiful castle. I love if you look closely at the forefront of the image, you can see that the walls that go around it to protect the castle. So really authentic stuff here we're looking at. So a really interesting, and this is very different. Slovakia is very different from Austria or Germany, the two wealthiest countries in the EU. Slovakia, not so much, but a very rich history here. Then we end this cruise in Budapest, actually two cities, Buda and Pest, on each side of the river there. And another great city to visit. Bruce, you spent some time here. You came in early. What did you do and see? What did you like about Budapest?
Well, the funny part is we got to our hotel probably about 2:30 p.m. and we wanted to go over to the Great Market. And we were told, oh, they just closed. Like they closed at like 3.
Oh,
Like,
really?
okay, so we'll do it on Sunday. We had, the morning free before we got on the ship. And the lady's like, oh, they're not open on Sundays. But we figured out we'd get there on Monday. So it was a long day with the flight, getting up, whatever. So we just walked around by the hotel a little bit. But the next day we got up, had breakfast really early. And then we just we did almost like an hour and a half walk. We went to the old Jewish section. We just hit a lot of different places. And it was it was just great walking around. I mean, you could tell that's a pretty big party city too.
Yes. And
as much as I could tell.
Something else, Bruce, that I don't think a lot of Americans know, or maybe they do if they know the history, but you have some really fantastic Jewish heritage sites in many of these cities in the central part of Europe. I mean, the Jewish quarter in Budapest is famous, Vienna as well, Prague. When we get on the Rhine, you have the similar things along the Rhine River. So if that's something that's of interest to you, like I mentioned earlier, maybe that's something you research, we can actually help you, find these places, famous and historic synagogues and just a lot of heritage sites along these old river routes. So,
the Grand Market was incredible. My wife bought a good amount of paprika home.
Yes.
That was kind of cool. It was a great itinerary, and I know we're moving on to the next one, but just a couple of comments to people. The service on the ship was incredible. The staff. I asked around to a couple of friends of mine that own agencies that have been on a lot of river cruise, and I said to them, what makes Amma, what would you suggest? And almost everyone to a fault said Amma, and I said, well, why? And they said, because you're treated like family on board. And the service is exemplary. The food is incredible. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good to me. That's why we partnered up for these cruises this past year. And as soon as we got on the ship, that was it. It was like family. It's like they knew us. And the week was incredible. And I know that's their job to make you feel that way, but the personalized service was really something. My wife cannot eat peppers. Jalapenos fine, whatever, but bell peppers.
Right.
They, everything that she ordered, they knew, they asked, whatever. We had a lady at our table, friends of a client of mine, friends of ours, that she had a gluten
Right.
allergy. They were all over that.
Yep.
Like, I've never been anywhere where they were all over that. Like, they'd be like, well, oh, for this dessert, we can do that, sure. For this, we can't, but we could substitute this. And it was just about the service. The local guides were great. It just was a great week.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. And you mentioned gluten-free. My wife has a gluten allergy as well, and they looked after her so well. But about 2/3 through this itinerary, I think she was tired of eating gluten-free desserts. And she said, Steve, even though it might upset my stomach, I'm going to go to the regular table. And the waiter stopped her. And she said, get away from me. This is my cheat night. Okay, just leave me alone. So anyway, so yeah, everything you say, obviously I agree with. And we are known in our sector of the industry as, that cruise line that looks after everything, the details, knows everybody. When I get on a ship, people look familiar to me. Some of the crew looks familiar to me, but they will come up and say, how are you, Stephen? I haven't seen you in 2 years. And I'm like, I can't place exactly where I've seen them, but they know the sailing that we were on together. It's amazing. I don't know how they do it. It's some kind of technique they have, but it is amazing. So anyway, this is let's see. So this is, I think, what people think of, Bruce, when they think of Budapest, the Parliament buildings that get lit up like this at night, and they look sort of golden here. I think everyone that's been to Budapest, on the river, has some images of this on their phone or somewhere. And it's a great way to end a wonderful itinerary, a great week on the Danube River. So thank you for your input there. And we loved having you on the ship. And so I'm glad everything worked out for you. Now we're going to look at an itinerary in France, the essence of Burgundy and Provence. This is for June of 2023. Beautiful time of year to be in these parts of France. The neat thing about this itinerary is that it marries two rivers together. It marries up in the northern part of France, the Saône River, in the southern part of France, the Rhone River, okay? And the midway point here is typically Lyon in France, which is a very famous city, mostly famous for its food, its cuisine. And this itinerary is a really interesting itinerary, especially if you're a foodie, if you appreciate the different types of cuisines as we go through different parts of the country, and also if you appreciate wine pairing. What kind of wines would I drink with this kind of meal? What kind of wine would I drink with that kind of meal? So this, as we go through this, you'll see this is a lot about tasting and drinking. And the cuisines really are different from north to south, and we'll discuss why that is. So in the Burgundy region, the Bourgogne region, you have lighter wines. You have the Beaujolais wines. They don't ferment as long. They're easier to drink. People will say they don't give you a hangover, that kind of thing. But also the cuisine, it's in France now, the cuisine is based on dairy. It's based on butter and milk. You're eating meats in rich sauces. The French are known for their butter. Their butter is fantastic. People, in this country, we would love to have butter like the French make butter, right? So this is the kind of cuisine you're going to get on the Saône River, beef bourguignon, very sort of heavy, very rich. And as we travel, and cheeses, this is the Epoisse cheese. These are these French, very aromatic, we'll say, to be polite, very aromatic cheeses. And there are several towns and cities, and in Lyon, there's actually an ordinance that says if you come into the town and you go to the cheese store and you buy Epoisse and a couple of other types of cheeses, you are not permitted to get on public transportation. That's how bad these cheeses smell. But they taste, they melt in your mouth. They're delicious if you can get past the aroma. But honestly, you can look this up in Lyon. you can't get on a bus or a train if you bought Epwa locally, you've got to get back in your car or put it on the back of your bicycle and go home. You cannot get on public transport. So I always found that kind of amusing. But I mean, so bread and cheese and wines and beef. I mean, this is what it is. It's all based on dairy, right? It's a dairy laden part of the country. A lot of farms, a lot of vineyards. It's beautiful. It's just a beautiful part of France. This is where we'd actually get on the ship here in Chalon-sur-Saône. This actual town is known for their white wines, their Chardonnays and their Rosés. And you'll know as we go through this, there'll be a lot of wine. The excursions will be, you don't have to do wine tasting excursions, but there'll be a wine tasting just about every day, if not every day. And also a great itinerary to do bike riding because it's very flat. The area is very flat and the distances between the ports is not great. So you could actually take a bike out and bike to the next port and meet the ship at the next port in many cases. So food for thought there. Tourneau, a wonderful medieval city. I mean, some of these structures go back to the 12th and 13th century. Great day here. I don't think, if you've not been to these, if you've not traveled along the rivers, I think a lot of, excuse me, Americans don't know what medieval is or don't know how old 1,000 years is. I mean, there are structures here from the 12th and 13th century that are still standing, that you can go into, that you can visit. You're not going to find elevators around here. You're not going to find, ramps and things like that. They are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They can't mess with these structures, right? They're the way they were 800 years ago, 1,000 years ago. So very interesting stuff. Chateau Cormatine, not quite as old. I think this is from the 14th or 15th century. I love the fact that it still has a moat around it. I think that's really, really cool. And a quick, interesting tidbit here is that to keep up some of these properties, some of this property was sold off to private sector so that they can maintain it and they can keep it for touristic purposes and have visitors. In the back part of this sprawling property, they've taken some of the chateaus and turned them into condos, okay, for very, very wealthy people. So that's how things move along. That's how things progress. And that's how they've kept some of this stuff where we can still go and visit it. Mâcon is known for Chardonnay wines as well. There's a wine tasting here. There's a bike riding excursion here. There are some walking tours here. I love this particular image because I love the waterfront scenes. I love the buildings along the waterfront, the cafes. If you look closely enough, you can see some awnings there at the street level of some of those buildings. And this is just a great area. Again, I'm always encouraging people to get off the ship after dinner. It'd be a great place to get off the ship after dinner. Go and have another glass of wine. Go do some sightseeing, some people watching. Park yourself and get dessert and watch people walk around. To me, that's the more authentic way of visiting these towns and meeting locals and talking to the local vendors and things like that. This is a great visit as well. And great wines. There are some wines in this part of France that I normally would not drink. I don't drink rosé wine. I call it, if I see it here for $8 bottle, it's like bubblegum wine, I call it. But in this part of France, they make a very heady rosé. They make a really nice rosé here. Same thing with Chardonnay. It's not a wine I would normally drink, a white wine that I would normally drink, but the Chardonnays from this region are just very good, very crisp and very good. And it's something about this region where I drink the wines here that I wouldn't drink in other parts of Europe or certainly not here in the States. So something to note. Cluny Abbey, lest we not forget that this part of France is very Catholic, and there's a lot of cathedrals and there's a lot of abbeys and visits like that. And the other thing I'll point out is that all of these old structures that we visit, the other interesting thing about them is that the grounds are kept so nicely. I mean, the gardens, everything's manicured nicely. And that's part of the visit too. It's not just being inside a really old building. It's that they have rows of roses or rows of flowers and things like that. So that also is part of the experience as you walk around these small towns. This image I put in here because it's a longer view of the Saône River, the Villa Francaise sur Saône. If you look back here, you see this is not a river like the Rhone, or like the Rhine rather, or the Danube, a big wide river with a lot of commerce and strong currents, and the river goes for hundreds of miles. This is a smaller, more meandering. You can see it just kind of snakes through the valley there. You can see I like the view of the town that's kind of built out from the riverbanks. And this is where, this is where civilization started, in Europe along the rivers. It's how people got from place to place. They didn't really have roads like they do now. So all the commerce took place on the rivers, all the transportation took place on the rivers, and all the towns were built out on the rivers. So I kind of like this shot. I think it's kind of meaningful. Beaujolais, we talked about. This will be a typical scene on the Saône River. You'll see these vineyards in a lot of places. And again, I could show you 50 slides on all the wine tasting that we would do on this itinerary, but just know that if that's what you're into, there's opportunity to taste wine on the ship and off the ship. Just a beautiful itinerary for cuisine and for wines. Lyon is the midway point. Lyon is the third largest city in France. It is the gastronomical capital of France. There are more Zagat-rated restaurants in Lyon than there are in Paris. It is my favorite city in France. I would say Lyon, and then Strasbourg along the Rhine is another favorite city of mine. But the neat thing about Lyon is that you have this convergence of culture and cuisine. So you can find restaurants that have the rich dairy-laden recipes from the Saône River, but you can also find, and this is the difference now, what you find from here on the Rhone moving south is Mediterranean, because once upon a time, this was part of the Roman Empire. So instead of everything is in butter, served in butter or butter sauce, things like that, it's now olive oil, and you'll see olives and you'll see tomatoes on your plate. So everything sort of flips all of a sudden to a Mediterranean-like style cuisine, and that's because of the Romanesque influence here, and you'll see it in the architecture as well. But Lyon, great city. Again, I can't say enough. Get off the ship, do some sightseeing, get down the alleyways, nooks and crannies, taste some stuff off the ship as well. Just a great, great city. There's a nice view of one of the footbridges. And some of the things I'm referring to here is you've got olives, and you've got some more stinky cheese, and you've got some desserts, and just so many different things here in Lyon to taste and get your senses going, right? So a great city. Vienne is a small town. This is the first place you'll really notice when you're in the center of the town here. You'll actually think you're somewhere in southern Italy, right? So there's a lot of these structures, a lot of these buildings are still standing, and you can see the Romanesque influence here. Here's a tasting here of the Rhone red Cornas wines. Again, you think of Côtes du Rhône now. You don't have the lighter wines. You have something a little heavier on the red side. Côtes du Rhône, a lot of different. Côtes du Rhône just means the banks of the Rhone, so it takes in a lot of different kinds of wines. So people think it's one type of wine. It's not necessarily. It's just wine from that region. Avignon, this is the famous broken bridge at Avignon. It's probably about 800 years old. And in the background of Avignon, you will see the Papal Palace, because some of us might remember from, if you had a Catholic upbringing, that the papacy was actually in Avignon, France, from about 1308 to about 1390. They split from the Vatican. They split from Rome, and there were 3 popes that actually served here while the papacy was in Avignon. And we do include that visit. It's still a beautiful structure. It was, I don't think the French did much with it until maybe 80, 90 years ago, and they kind of spruced it up a bit, and now it's fit for tourism again. And then culinary tastings. Again, I've made reference to this a couple of times, and I guess I've left out some of the cured meats that you'll find, some of the breads that you'll find. Just it's what I think about when I think of this region of France. So I'm sitting outside with a baguette and a glass of wine and a piece of cheese and maybe a slice of salami or something like that. Just a good way to spend an afternoon, I think, anyway. So another great opportunity here for cuisine off the ship. And then Arles in France is where this itinerary ends. And again, reference to the Romanesque features here. That amphitheater there in the center of town is from 90 AD, and it's a miniature version of the Colosseum in Rome. Used to hold 10,000 spectators. It lay dormant for many, many years, and it wasn't until like the 1930s, early 30s, the French sort of refitted it. It seats 5,000 spectators now. They used it for bullfighting back in the day. That's sort of fallen out of favor. Once in a while, you might see a bullfight there nowadays, but sort of unpopular these days. But it's used today for, rock concerts, music concerts. You go on their version of Ticketron or Ticketmaster, and you see who's in town, who's playing, and that's where you're going to see that concert. So pretty cool that they still use that, and it's 1,000 years old, right? So I think that's pretty cool. And then the center, or the old section of Arles, is where we visit the house, the half house that Van Gogh lived in for a couple of years. And it was here we visit his house. And I believe it's also a visit to, then he was after he cut off part of one of his ears, he was put in a sanitarium for about a year and a half, where he was very prolific. He was doing a lot of classic work there in this sanitarium. He did Starry Night, he did Night Scene at a Cafe, and a lot of that was about Arles. Okay, so it's very historic and quite interesting, actually. His story, if you take the time and actually read what actually happened to him in his life, and the fact that he was misunderstood and he did have some mental illness, he was a very interesting guy. And then the post stay here is in Barcelona, Spain. We finish up in the south of France. We're not far from the north of Spain. We get on a high-speed train. We spend 3 nights in Barcelona, and just a great way to end this itinerary if you have the time. Beautiful city in the northern part of Spain. And now the third itinerary that we'll look at now. So we've gone through different seasons, we've gone through different countries, and we're at the Christmas season now, the Christmas holiday season. We're on the Rhine River. We're in early December, which is the sweet spot of the Christmas market season. Christmas markets typically begin after our Thanksgiving here in the States, so the end of November. And depending on what country you're in, what city you're in, some of them will run up till Christmas and stop there. If the town or the city is Catholic, it might go to the Epiphany, to the 6th of January, depending on where you are. So we operate these cruises on the Rhine and on the Danube, and the concept is, let's see how, in many cases, our ancestors celebrated the Christmas holiday. It's not a religious thing at all. It's just it's a celebration of the holiday of Christmas, and how do they decorate the towns, and how does the cuisine change, and so on and so forth. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people are into it. We don't operate all of our ships. We operate a couple of our ships, and this is the perfect week. I don't know which of you gentlemen I should credit to, probably Tony on that. I don't know, but that is the time. People want to go the first week of December on this itinerary so that they're back in the States the second week of December, and if they have to spend time with family. But I will say this, it's a great opportunity at these Christmas markets to do Christmas shopping and bring people home, bring your family and loved ones home, authentic gifts, handmade gifts, things like that. And the itinerary starts in Amsterdam, ends in Basel, Switzerland. So in this case, 4 countries in 7 days, right? And the Netherlands, Germany, France, and Switzerland. Couple of cities, Amsterdam, Cologne. But the other stops are really small medieval stops. Great, just no vehicular traffic, and you're walking around and you're doing your thing. Just a great itinerary here. This is the Festival of Lights that they do in Amsterdam. And a lot of what you're seeing in the States now, where these light shows, I think the first one they did was about Van Gogh. Was it last Christmas here? They came to Boston, and then they went through the country. Now they're doing something with Frida Kahlo, these light shows. This started in Amsterdam about 3 or 4 years ago. This concept of doing art, mixing art with these light shows started here. I think they did the Van Gogh Festival of Lights at Christmas maybe 3 years ago, 2019, I want to say. And it's really cool. You can either walk around the city. It's a canal city. You can either walk around the city and see the Festival of Lights, or you can get on in front of you. You can see these canal boats that hold about 15 passengers. And that's a really cool way to see the city. You don't have to cross footbridges or anything like that. You're sailing right next to everything. I mean, the buildings are right on the waterways. People live on their houseboats. It's a really cool city. Another place where there's a gazillion things to do. If you like cuisine, if you like seafood, if you like museums. A couple of years ago, I went with my adult daughter. She was in her early 20s with her boyfriend and my wife. And we sort of split up in Amsterdam because we knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to go to the different quarter of Amsterdam and try some of the local shops. And that's something my wife and I wanted to do at that time. So there's something for everybody in Amsterdam. Great city, a lot of history here too. Anne Frank's house is there too. If you wanted to visit Anne Frank's house, it's something you'd have to actually pre-reserve in advance. It's very hard to get to see that home that's still there, and you need to buy tickets in advance. Here's Cologne, Germany. That has the dubious distinction of being the most bombed city in Europe during the Second World War by the Allies. This is one of the very few structures that's still standing. Is their cathedral, their national cathedral. They started construction on this in the 12th century, I think 1260 maybe, and didn't finish till the late 1800s. The idea of a Christmas market. Look at this image here. Those red, canvas tops there are what the vendors, their stalls. They come out, the vendors come out and they fill the stalls. If it's a cheese shop or a pastry shop, there's beer, there's wine, there's live music, there are gifts. My wife and I like to buy handmade Christmas ornaments that we like to bring home and give as gifts or put them on our trees. Nothing's really expensive. It's a lot of fun. It's like a festival. It's like a party every afternoon into the evening. You do the regular sightseeing that we would do on our itineraries. And then in the afternoon, we let you have at it at the Christmas markets. It's a really neat experience. Not for everybody, but it's a lot of fun, and we get a lot of families at this time of year. Most of our ships have triples and quads, and you will see generational. This is the time of year where you'll see generational travel, and you'll see families and friends traveling together. A lot of group business that comes out of the Christmas market itineraries. This is Heidelberg. Great town, not a big town, great walking town, a lot of footbridges here. You can see just the tops of some of the stalls. And, again, it's not a religious holiday, so to speak. It's just an outdoor festival. And there's a lot of things to do and see and eat and drink. Glühwein is the local, it's their alcoholic version of, let's say, eggnog here. I mean, you're drinking this mulled hot wine with cinnamon in it, and you'll see that a lot at this, and you'll see a lot of beer stalls at this thing. Just a lot of fun, and you're with locals. I mean, there's not a lot of certainly not a lot of North American tourists that are here at this time of year. It's just there's only a handful of river ships that stay in the market this long to do the Christmas markets. Not all the companies do it. Strasbourg, I mentioned Strasbourg earlier. This is a fantastic small city, great cuisine here. Very different. Strasbourg is a part of France in the east that Germany and France used to fight over the centuries, and over maybe 250 years, Strasbourg was part of Germany, was part of France, was part of Germany, was part of France. Maybe 5 times it switched. And you literally had, when there was a war over the territory, you had maybe sons fighting on the French side when their fathers fought on the German side, because there was so much a change in the borders of the territories. And they spoke German as the national language for 60 years. Then it swapped hands. Then they spoke French. Now it's been part of France since 70, I'm going to say, roughly that. So they speak French here, but sort of with a German accent, right? So it's really interesting. And I love, this is a square that I know well. I've been here many times, and I like what they do with it at Christmas time. They put up a real tree, and you see people all around. And it's a beautiful city any time of year, but it's kind of neat when it's all lit up at Christmas time. And then here you toward the end of this itinerary, you're actually in the Black Forest, and in this case, sailing south. On the left bank is France. No, got that wrong. On the left bank is Germany. On the right bank is France. So you can go into the Black Forest, this town of Gengenbach, and this time of year they have the Advent calendar, an actual building that's an Advent calendar, and their claim is that it's the largest Advent calendar in Europe. Don't know. I've not checked that out. I don't know how to verify that, but it is a really interesting town. It's a great visit. The Black Forest hike that we offer one day is little waterfalls and footbridges and just a blast. So great part of the Rhine here. And then Freiburg also is another town that's a really small medieval town. You could see the whole town in 40 minutes, but it's a really cool visit. Great coffee shops, great pastry, things like that. I appreciate the small towns. I feel like I have time to speak to the shop owners. When we get done with the walking tour, you can stick around for an hour or two before you have to get back to the ship. I like to talk to the locals. I like to speak to the shop owners. I like to, if I think in Freiburg, my wife and I went into a small wine shop and bought some very nice wine. We're gonna meet my daughter and her boyfriend back on the ship, and she liked a particular type of wine that we had on the ship, maybe the beginning of the trip, and we saw it in this wine shop, and we brought a couple of bottles back on the ship. So little things like that. I like the smaller towns. I like to chat up the locals. That's one of my things. And then we end in Basel, Switzerland. By the way, Basel is also where our European headquarters are. So you could walk to our headquarter offices in Europe from where the ship docks. It's about a 20-minute walk. Beautiful town as well. Switzerland is what people tell you it is. It runs like a clock. There's never you couldn't find a piece of paper on the streets. You could eat off the streets. So Switzerland is very interesting country. And that's it. I hope I did that in a reasonable amount of time. An hour. I wanted to do less. Sorry, I talked too much, but okay. But so for any of these itineraries, Bruce and Tony have special pricing that they've negotiated, not through me, but through my company, for a group discount, basically. So the idea is when you book a group, you're bringing more people, you get a better price. So that's the deal there. And if you have questions, I can open it up for questions now. But I do encourage you all to, in the next couple of days, reach out to the guys if you have any follow-up or any other questions. If you want me to come back at a future date and just focus on one itinerary, do a deeper dive, I can do that as well. But I will stop here, and we can open it up for questions, I think. Is that right? Yes, we can open it for questions here. Okay, so we're back to the Hollywood Squares view. And if anybody's muted, you can unmute yourself and let me know feedback, questions for Bruce, questions for me.
All right, I have a question. Sandy Cross. On the French itinerary, where do they fly into and where do they fly out of if they aren't doing Barcelona? I did not see Paris on that
Actually, because of where it is, in the northern part of France, Sandy, they would fly into Geneva, Switzerland,
Okay,
okay? And at the end, that is a good question. I'm not sure where they fly out of. I'd have to.
maybe Lyon.
You're right, it is Lyon. Absolutely, because you connect back through Paris or someplace else. Absolutely, it's Lyon. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
Any questions, anyone?
I think I already asked mine, and that was I was particularly the 3 cruises that you are talking about. The one, your initial email that interested me was the French, was specifically because of the, I noticed that although it's not definitive, this is more or less the lavender fields are in bloom. And so I've been to France a number of times. I said, I'm not going again until I can go when the lavender is in bloom. So the answer was you do, AMA offers another cruise that is in that area. But my question is, at the end of this cruise, now you said it goes on to Barcelona, and yes, another group, person ought to stay in Avignon or wherever it is. Could you then 2 or 3, 4 days on your in the
Yeah.
lavender? Are you
Yes.
within that same area?
So Ruth, that's a great question. And yes, I have travel consultant clients that have customized a couple of days, and it's in the Avignon area, up in the foothills. Grignon and Beau and those places there are where you would see, and the timing to see the lavenders is June and July. It's a kind of an odd season that's when they're in bloom, but that's when they're in bloom. And yes, you do the colors of Provence. That's the name of the itinerary. And again, I know I'm always bringing back full circle. That's why you use a travel consultant, because Bruce or Tony would find you some locally guided, tours, or however you want to do it. There's different ways to get at it, but that is what some people do. They stay there and do their own program, or hire somebody to guide them. And you see the lavenders and the sunflowers as well, right?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Anyone else?
Mhm.
Is
And there's a
Cindy,
lot of information,
is Cindy on, Bruce? Cindy Shields, is she on here?
He was 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's
here.
here.
Okay. Okay. Because actually it's Cindy and Terry and Karen, the same group that, not with you, but we German market cruise right before. So I suggested possibly next year. We'll see.
I mean, this was my first river cruise.
Right?
It was great. We had the best of time. The other 3 couples that came with us were basically said the same thing. It was incredible. So I know myself and my wife and probably at least 2 of those couples are going to go do a tulip time in April but not until 2024. We'll have another Zoom presentation on that one later,
Is that-
when 2024 opens.
Is that off? Are you thinking of
I didn't hear that.
Kuchenhop? Are you thinking of
I'm not sure. I'd have to, I don't really know their itineraries, but I know that the
It
tour
includes
director.
Kuchenhof. Yeah.
Okay,
So you come into Amsterdam, and there's a day Kuchenhof, and depending on the time of year that you go, there's a lot of floral shows. There's even Florealis, I think, is in Antwerp in April. So April is the month where there's a lot of opportunities to see not only tulips but other floral shows. So if you can book that in advance, because it's only a 6-week period where you can see the tulips. April is the month you're looking at.
So Stephen, on that trip, do you actually go to Kuchenhof Gardens? Would actually take you? Do
Yeah.
they do?
Yeah, we
Can I
spent those there. Yeah.
And I'm curious, how much time do you get to spend there?
You spend about 2.5 hours there. And there is also and we get to ask these questions all the time, Ruth. So if people want to spend more time there, you can come in. We sell a 2-night pre-stay in Amsterdam, and then you can, customize and do your own thing and spend more time there. Because I know a lot of people would say of a lot of our excursions, I would like to spend more time there, and you can. And that's why we do pre and post, because some people want to come in early and do a little more, or do things on their own, and that's fine. And you don't have to buy our pre or post. Again, this is why you use a travel advisor. They can customize something for you, right? But Kuchenhof is one of the highlights of that itinerary, and it is a focus for us. And the itinerary will run from the middle of March to the first week of May. But trust me, you want to be there in April. Okay, that's your best chance of the peak tours.
Thank you.
Okay,
Anybody else? I think we're good.
yep. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I'm sorry I went a little bit over in time. Let's
Thank
go Celtics.
Yeah, here.
Okay,
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, everyone. Just
Yeah.
remember, just give us a call, email, what have you, if you're interested. We have the space and we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
good night, everyone.
Good night.
you.
Thank you, Stephen.